All right, welcome back. We are going to start looking at using ShopMath to create cut lists. Now, I'm sure you are curious, why in the world do we ever need to use ShopMath to create a cut list? Well, more often than not, you're going to find yourself being handed a drawing that looks something like this. And on this drawing, it has all of the information you need to build it, but it doesn't necessarily tell you all of the pieces that you need to cut to length. It's all there by using math and adding and subtracting, but you still need to think things out a little bit. Anytime you get handed a drawing, you need to look for notes and you need to see what you're building and how you're building it. So in this case, you're building one and then reversing and repeating. So that just means that you're going to build this and then build the mirror image. You're also going to build a typical TV style flat. TV style flat means that we're building our board or our flats on edge, not on face. And because it's a TV style flat, we are making it out of 1x3 instead of 2x4s. So that means that every single one of these thicknesses that you see, all of these are valued at 3/4 of an inch. Think this board, this is a really gross exaggeration, but this board is a 1x12. So right here, you can see the actual thickness of it is 3/4 of an inch. So this board is represented in these drawings, the thickness of it, by that gap right there, okay? So let's look at something a little bit easier than that one before we really dive into things though. We'll just look at a simple 4x8 flat that we need to make a cut list for. Okay, so on our flat, we've got, and this is obviously not to scale. I'll try to draw it as neat as I can. But you can see how there are 2 rails, 2 stiles, and then we're going to have 2 toggles. Okay. And we know that this is a 4-foot by 8-foot flat. Okay? So the whole reason of creating a cut list is that we need to figure out what size do I cut my boards to. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to find the notes. The notes say not to scale, build one, TV style. Okay, so if we're looking at that, we have all the information that we need right now because we know this is a TV style flat, which means all of these thicknesses are 3/4 of an inch. That one is, this one is, even these ones in there, but that doesn't necessarily matter. When you're doing a cut list, you always want to do the longest pieces to the shortest pieces. So looking at this, we can pretty much guess that our longest pieces are going to be the stiles. You have this style and this style right here. We need to do some math though, because if you look at the drafting, you can see the leader lines are taking you to the overall height of the flat. What we need to know is what is this distance here. So we need to take off this 3/4 of an inch and this 3/4 of an inch. So that means we have 8 foot 0 inches minus 3/4 plus 3/4. Okay, and we're going to figure out what this is so that we only have to subtract one thing. So going across, we have common denominators. So 3 plus 3 is 6/4, which is equal to 1 2/4, which is equal to 1 1/2 inches. So now we're going to subtract 1 1/2 inches. Now, this is exactly the same as before. We're going to break this down into our 3 categories. We can't take a 1/2 inch from nothing, so we need to borrow something from here. But there's nothing here to be borrowed. So we're going to borrow a foot. This becomes 7. This is 12, right? We're going to borrow one of these. That means that we're at 11 and then 2 halves. Okay. So to get enough to subtract a ½ inch, we needed to borrow our inches and then borrow one of those to build this column. So then we've got the common denominator, and then it's just taking 1 from 2, which is a half. Now we're going to subtract 1 inch from the 11, and that is 10. And then we've got 7, and we're not taking any numbers away from that. So that gives us 7 foot 10 and a half inches. So over here, I'm going to write my cut list out. And I know that I need 1, 2 at that distance. So I will just say 2 at 7 foot 10 and a half inches. Okay. Then the next thing that I'm going to look at is I see the rails of my flat, and I see that the dimension has already been given to me. There's no math necessary, and I know that there's a rail at the bottom, and I know there's a rail at the top. So that means that I need 2 at 4 foot 0 inches. Then I just need to do one more set, and I need to figure out what these toggles are. Just like the stiles, the toggles are shorter than the overall length provided. So that means that I'm going to have to take this 4 feet and then subtract the thickness of this stile and this stile, which are both 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go 4 foot 0 inches minus, and we already know if we're taking away 2 at 3/4, it's 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. Okay. We'll break this down one more time into our columns. And then just like before, we're going to have to do some borrowing. So I take this 4, it turns into a 3. Then I'm just going to put 11 because I already know that I'm borrowing 1. And then my 2 halves. Okay. And then it's just going through the motions. 1 minus 2 is a half. 1 minus 11 is 10. 3 minus 0 is 3. That gives me 3 foot 10 and a half inches. So if I go through and I look at my drawing, particularly my toggles, I see that on this one there are 2. So I'm going to put 2 at 3 foot 10 inches. Sorry, excuse me. 3 foot 10 and a half inches. So that is my completed cut list. That's all that I need to know to build this flat. I'm going to cut my 1x3s to 2 at this, 2 at this, and 2 at this. And that's all the more that I need to do. Now, we don't just build flats. Sometimes we need to build a platform. So this time, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a platform that is a little bit weirder shaped. And, okay. So this is going to be our platform. We're going to say this is 2 foot 8 1/4. I'm making these numbers up as I go. This is 7 5/8 inches from the top here to the bottom. This is going to be 2 foot 2 1/4 from here to there. And then this distance right here is going to be 1 foot 7 5/8. Got a lot of 5/8. All right. So doing the same thing that we did with our flat cut list, we need to look at this and kind of try to guess what our pieces need to be. And we'll just start from the longest to the shortest. Since this isn't to scale, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But if I look at this and I say, well, right here, I know that this is already given to me. And I know that I need one, and this is, I'm sorry, we look at our notes and we say, build one platform. Okay, so then I'm just going to make a make-do cut list over here until I know what everything is. So I look here, and this one's already given to me, and that is 1 at 2 foot 8 1/4. And since this is kind of weird and I need to keep track of things, I'm just going to draw a line. I can color it in, whatever. But then that way we know that we've got that board figured out. Now I've got these two that are the same length. What I need to do is figure out how to find that distance. I don't have an overall length here, so what I have to do is add this number to this number. So that looks like we've got 2 foot 2 1/4 plus 7 5/8. Okay, so we'll break this down into our 3 columns, and we're going to subtract 5/8 from 1/4. We can't do that because they're not common denominators. So my quarter becomes 2/8. We still can't subtract that because you can't take 5 from 2. So we're going to steal this inch. This becomes 1. And then we're going to add 8/8. And that gives us 10/8. Okay? So then 10/8, 5 minus 10 is 5/8. Then we're going to subtract 7 from 1, but we can't do that because there's not enough there. So we're going to steal one of these feet. This becomes a foot. And then we're going to add 12, which gives us 13. 7 minus 13, we're going to take 13 away from 7, which sometimes you got to use your fingers. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Whoa, let's think about that for a second. 6. And then 1 minus 0 gives us 1. 1 foot, 6 5/8. Am I done? No, because that's giving me the distance from the top to the very bottom. So what I need to do is subtract this thickness and this thickness. Because this is a platform, we build our platforms out of 2x4s. 2x4s are 1.5 inches thick. So that means that this thickness right here is 1.5 inches. That's why earlier in the semester, I told you to understand the thicknesses of the boards because we need to take that into account when we're creating our cut lists. So what I need to do is I need to take 1.5 inches and this 1.5 inches and take it away from this. So we'll just real quickly go 1.5 plus 1.5. That gives me 2 2/2, which is equal to 3. So then I come down here and I subtract 3, 1 foot, 3 5/8 inches. Okay? And I know I need 2 of those. So I'll go 2 at 1 foot, 3 5/8 inches. Okay? Then it's just a matter of figuring out the rest of these pieces. So this one is given to me. I know that that is 1 foot 7 5/8. This one, this distance, I need to cross out the ones that I've done. So we've got this one and this one. We just found that one. Now we're going to work on this one. So we need to take 2 foot 8 1/4 minus 1 foot 7 5/8. Same thing we did earlier. We're going to borrow this, becomes 7, and then this becomes 10/8, right? 2 8s plus 8 8s gives us our 10/8. 10 minus 5 gives us 5/8. 7 minus 7 gives us 0. 1 minus 2 gives us 1. 1 foot, 0, and 5/8. I forgot to draw in the lines there, but you can see how I still worked through all of those categories. It looks like we only need 1 there, so I'll do 1 at 1 foot, 0, and 5/8. And then the last one that I've got is, let me cross this one off. The last one that I've got is this distance right here, and that's giving me the overall. And what I need to do is take into account the thickness of these 2x4s, which is 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches. We already did that. We found out that's 3. So I will take 7 5/8 minus 3 0/8, right? Because it's just 3 inches, but just to keep it consistent. So then we've got 5/8 and then 4. And we just need one of those at 4 5/8. Okay? So now I'm going to make my official cut list and write all of these in order, because you can see right here, these two are off. So then I will say cut list, and then one at 2 foot 8 1/4, one at 1 foot 7 5/8, two at 1 foot 3 5/8, one at 1 foot 0 5/8, one at 4 5/8. Man, that's a lot of 5/8. The reason that we always cut things from longest to shortest is you might end up with a piece of scrap that you can get 4 5/8 out of. But if I've got a 3-foot board and I cut 4 5/8 off of it, I can't cut my 2 foot 8 1/4 anymore off of that. So by always doing your longest pieces to your shortest pieces, it gives you the ability to not waste as much material.